Hey, what's up, everybody? How's it going? Frank and Shannon are here. We want to talk about something that's near and dear to us, and that would be the training, strength training, athletic training of kids and teens. Frank has done that in the past, and he continues to do that. And Shannon also has treated some young people, and I have done sports physicals, and I've helped to not necessarily train, but guide young people in nutrition and some sports training. So we wanted to address that in a podcast. So I think what we wanted to talk about first, maybe I can hand it over to Frank, is what is his experience with training teens when it comes to weight training, body weight training, or just preventing injuries?
Yeah. Well, I think it has to do with, first of all, if I'm training a teen, I want to get okay from the doctor. So I have to send them to you or their doctor and say, okay, they're good, or they had a recent physical, stuff like that. Make sure there's nothing that we need to be alerted to.
So a physical beforehand?
Yeah, physical beforehand is what I would definitely do. And then, there's different schools of thought on this. I mean, I know a lot of 12, 13-year-olds. They're doing heavy Olympic lifting over their head. But, I mean, there's a risk there that you're going to stunt your growth or injure something, because your body's still growing. Mm-hmm. So, I'm more of a conservative when I train teens. I basically do more... stay away from the ones that are going to load the joints super heavy, like overhead stuff, and super, out to the side, because your body, they're get to realize with teens, their body is still developing. So once you injure something at a young age, you're probably going to have a chronic problem with that as you get older and older. I know kids that were trained incorrectly, and I mean, they're 15 blown out ACLs, and it's just because I remember the one kid, he has to do like real heavy leg extensions. I'm like, first of all, you don't want to do that when you're that age, and then he blew out his ACL that year in football. I'm like, first of all, you don't even do that for football training. But bottom line is, you got to be specific to what the person wants. I mean, if they're an athlete, you want to be specific to a baseball player, be specific to what you're doing with baseball players, and take their age in consideration. And take if there's any injuries in consideration, any health issues. I mean, unfortunately, some young kids do have health issues. You want to make sure that you're doing everything safely, I guess, is the thing you want to look at. But yeah, I mean, and for me, I would just do, it's depending on the level of the person too. I mean, I look at people like, okay, you've never lifted weights in your life. I'm not going to sit there and do a specific plan for you. I'm going to try and build your overall strength first. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you've never bench pressed in your life, or you've never anything in your life. I basically would try and develop something that's going to allow them to just strengthen their overall body first.
One thing I wanted to add to that was compound movements for kids.
Yeah, for sure.
More so than any isometric.
Yeah.
Because they don't really need to train individual, specialize their individual muscles like that, especially because they're not going to be bodybuilding at that age either. So it's really more about the compound movements and those movement to strengthen both ligaments, tendons, joints, the bone, increasing bone density, and the muscles all around those joints. So that'd probably be more important to me to train then.
Well, it's also the thing, but Shannon can talk a little bit more on this, but training individuals for specific to where you're strengthening those muscles, where if you're doing a sport that's got heavy, if you're like, for example, would be like football, a lot of cuts, this and that, you want to make sure all those muscles around your knees are going to be strong. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you'd want to do strength training, and to train specific to preventative injuries are going to be completely different. Mm-hmm. So, and that's where Shannon could talk a little bit more on that, as far as, she could say that, okay, if you're a football player, these are the things you definitely want to do, because you need to strengthen those muscles around the areas that you're going to be using a lot of. I mean, I can strengthen the quads, I can strengthen the upper body, but again, you want to strengthen to prevent injury too. Right. Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the greatest things that's probably changed in dealing with young athletes is that kids start specializing so young now, right? Like where it used to be, kids played different sports through different seasons. Mm-hmm. They had a lot of free play, but that play involved riding their bikes, going to the park, playing on the monkey bars, holding their own body weight from a bar for a long period of time, jumping up and down, pulling themselves up onto a bar, all those kind of body control exercises.
No, it's that.
Well, it's either that or they play one sport all year round, and everything they do is training only for that sport, right? Which makes them very, very good at that sport, but also puts them at a greater risk for overuse injuries. I think decreased overall athleticism, right? Because I think doing a variety of activities just increases somebody's overall athleticism. And as you mentioned, tolerance in the tissues and the ligaments and the tendons, right? All those load-bearing tissues, building more versatility, right? Which is what I think would be ideal, but that's one of the struggles that we have with a lot of the young athletes is they are only doing their one sport. They don't have time for anything else, right? And if they don't do all year round training, they're not competitive with their peers, right? So in my mind, the variety in the training is probably one of the most important things we could do, and the adequate recovery time.
It's
Which
like
is
with a baseball
really
player.
tricky.
They're doing this all day long, and their arm is super.
Well,
They're not doing this arm, you know. I mean, that's the thing. It's you want to strengthen both sides of the body.
and they have made some improvements in throwing sports, right, for like pitch counting, things like that, to try to prevent injury. But it's really tricky because if they want to stay competitive with their peers, they have to be training as hard as their peers are, which is usually a lot.
What's been your experience with, because I've seen you train some baseball players, what's been your experience with certain athletes who are doing this either at the college level or competitive high school that you see? Do you see very sport specific injuries, or do you see injuries that are more generalized?
I think, yes, very sport specific
You do,
injuries.
okay.
Of course, baseball, the ulnar collateral ligament at the elbow is very common in those throwing athletes. Shoulder injuries, labrum, the repetitive use syndrome. So it depends. I see a lot of figure skaters, right? They tend to have a whole different set. Lots of knee pain, lots of ankle sprains.
Okay.
If we see people who do running and jumping, we'll see some of those tendinous
Yes.
attachment injuries, right? The jumper's knee, the Osgood Schlatter's, which is that bump at the attachment of the patellar tendon here.
I've seen that with wrestlers.
Right, Sever's
they're
disease at the
underneath
heel,
it.
right? So I think kids that are generating a lot of power, their injuries tend to be where the tendons attach
Yes.
onto the bone and create
Absolutely.
an inflammation at that site, right?
Mhm.
Which again requires you to back off on your sport,
Yeah.
rest it, recover, and then gradually build some tolerance in those tissues to the amount of force that we're putting through them.
I guess I could add on to that a little bit. I think young athletes, unless they have a mentor or a coach that's helping them in the recovery part, because I think they're at a disadvantage, because most of the time mom and dad don't know what to do. They don't know how to help. At least my parents didn't know. They barely knew how to do much anything when it came to sports recovery or sports specific things. So, if you have somebody in your corner who's trained like that, it doesn't have to be mom or dad. It doesn't, just a coach say, hey coach, what should I be eating when I go home? How many
Right.
hours should I be sleeping? When should I be going to bed?
So most kids don't eat good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
they eat
most of them don't eat good.
McDonald's,
But if
yeah.
you're serious enough to do a sport year round, you must love it enough and think that you have a future in it. So I would think that you would want to identify certain areas like diet. Some of these young players think that they can get away with some bad food just because they're not really seeing a deficit in their game, but it can certainly catch up to them. Or if their protein was on point and they were eating more protein, maybe if they were carb loading before certain games and events, if they were getting good nutrients, like supplementing, their performance might be even better, and they may be preventing certain injuries.
Most people don't get enough protein.
No,
Very,
and I
very
don't think
good.
young athletes probably are.
No, most people don't get enough. Anytime you read an article on protein, they compare it to water. It's just as important. People realize, the functions that it does. I mean, it helps heal the body, and people don't realize you need to have that to heal your body, for sure.
And even carbs too. Like
Yeah.
I remember when I was in high school,
Especially when you're playing football.
yeah,
You need those
any
carbs.
sort of power
Yeah.
movements, you're going to use those type 1 fast twitch fibers. You're going to need carbs for that. You're going to need some carb loading for that. Track, football,
Energy production.
yeah. Even sprint, even
Stored.
swimming.
You're stored energy.
Yeah, I think we're getting more and more knowledge, and coaches are becoming much more knowledgeable about all those things all the time. Like, they're generally a great resource. A lot of the schools, high schools, college, have athletic trainers right there at their school, which are also a great resource, right, for injury prevention, recovery. And they usually have connections with nutritionists and folks like that that can help with that.
I remember when I was playing lacrosse in high school, I would get certain cramps like at the end of games. And I never really thought about putting like electrolytes in water. Even back then, like nobody had really like mentioned it. You may have like the soccer mom bring the oranges to halftime, but nobody really said, hey, you need to get electrolytes in your water, or you should be drinking like, you know, putting some salt in there or something.
Yeah, and salt's gotten a bad rap
Yeah.
as a general rule, which
Yeah.
is probably.
I don't think it had electrolytes when I was playing football.
Pickle juice. Pickle juice is
Yeah,
an
people would say pickle
old
juice.
one they've used forever.
Or there's some people who eat like mustard, like in, or they have candy. You know, football players would bring candy on the field. They just eat candy halfway through.
Yeah, I mean,
Or
it'll give you
honey.
instant energy.
They
Yeah.
eat honey.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's kind of lacking with kids because if you don't have that guidance at home, then you may not be really know what to do. You might go to school and you might train with your other students, but you don't really know what to do outside of that.
Right. Or, you know, kids go off to school, they eat what they want all day.
Yeah.
And parents don't have a lot of control over what they're eating a good portion of the time.
Are you speaking from experience?
No.
Well, back when I went to school, I mean, hell, they cooked all our food. It was good, man.
In the cafeterias?
Oh yeah, it was all cooked. They got it going early. They cooked, and it was like, our food was good.
Yeah.
I mean, it really was, man. It was like, eat like a king.
Did you have the lunch lady?
The lunch lady.
The stereotypical lunch lady?
Yes, I did. Yep. She'd limit me to 2 pieces of pizza. She made it. It was homemade pizza, dude. It was like.
It was homemade.
I mean, they would cook it, and you know, they'll use the, not their own dough, but I mean, they would cook.
It wasn't Pizza Hut.
No, it wasn't Pizza
Okay.
Hut. No, they cooked it there, and
Nice.
it was so good. But anyway, get off subject here.
All right.
Here comes the food.
We tend to get long-winded.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
All right.
What happened to our?
It's like a low battery.
Oh.